Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. So glad you're joining us here on the show today. Very excited to bring to you our guest. He is Don Christensen, and Don is the Executive Vice President of the Pro Athletes Division at Ronald Blue Trust. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast faithfully over the past, we'll say week, you've probably heard me mention Ronald Blue Trust, and they are our newest sponsors and partners here on Sports Spectrum, and we love what Ronald Blue Trust is about. And I've known Don Christensen a long time, and Don is a friend, but he's also the guy that I turn to if I ever have a question about finances, or I would refer someone who said, hey, is there a financial guy that I could just email a question to? Don Christensen is the guy. And so Don's joining us on the show today, and we're going to get into the impact that this coronavirus is having on the financial climate that we're all in right now, stuck in this pandemic. Don's got some great principles, all rooted from the Bible. He is grounded in Scripture. He's a strong man of faith, knows the Bible, he knows Jesus, and he is as trusted a guy as I know. And listen, he's the executive vice president of the Pro Athletes Division. So these professional athletes, the ones that some of them making lots and lots and lots of money and others maybe not making as much, those guys trust Don Christensen as well. And so we're honored and privileged to have Don, the executive vice president of Ronald Blue Trust Pro Athlete Division, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Let's take a listen to Don. Don, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be with you, bud.
Good to talk to you. Good to see you as we tape this over Skype so people know that we can actually see each other as we talk. And Don and I have known each other now a few years, and there's not anyone I'd rather talk to about financial advice or any kind of professional advice in the wealth world or the financial world than Don Christensen. But before we dive into kind of where we are now, which is just the craziness of the life that we're living in today in the pandemic, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the role that you have with Ron Blue and what that entails?
Well, I'm head of the professional athlete division of our company. We have about 4 divisions, and one of them is professional athletes. We have one, our biggest is our private wealth with just everyday persons, and then we have a family office for big, large Christian families, and then we call it everyday steward for those that help just the small people that just call in type people that need help, but don't need to pay a financial planning fee like that. So I started in the athlete business many years ago. I had a CPA practice in the late 70s, and one man came to me and asked me. He was just new in financial planning and had professional athletes. He'd asked me if I would prepare their tax returns. So I did that, but I realized this guy was going to get these guys in trouble. So I kind of told him to get an in-house CPA. And then my one man came to me, a pitcher named, he wouldn't mind me telling you, Floyd Bannister.
Yeah.
And Floyd says, hey, would you do my financial planning? He didn't trust this other guy. So it started with that guy, with Floyd. And from then on, as part of my CPA practice, was both an agent and I was a financial planner and their CPA. So about 1990, I realized that you can't be an agent and a financial planner. And I realized I would have a much more impact on their lives, the rest of their lives with financial planning. So I gave up the agent side of my practice and merged with Ronald Blue Trust and opened their Phoenix office and then opened their division for just athletes in about 2014.
That's great. You mentioned faith a little bit. Tell me some of your thoughts. As we'll talk about the current financial climate in a minute, but some of your thoughts on your faith, why it's important to you, that element. And I know, just having known you, I know the answer to this, but for those listening that don't know, your faith in Christ, that walk with Jesus, the importance of it to you.
Well, it's become, as you grow in your life, it's become everything. I grew up in a Christian home, but I grew up in a home or in a church that we got saved every Sunday night. So, it's one of those, you you're always losing your salvation. And I just quit trying to. I realized I couldn't perform for Jesus, so I walked out till I was about 33. And it was then that I was on a plane coming back from a business trip. I read a book by Hal Lindsey, There's a New World Coming. And I just realized that I don't know where I would be if this plane went down. And it was started my faith journey back. And it actually was a couple of baseball players, watching them, that really turned my heart towards the Lord. And I couldn't get enough. Went to seminary in 1988, even as a businessman, and just want to know that I just had a heart to teach the Bible. So, and I picked up a book by Ron Blue called Master Your Money. And he talked about all the principles of Scripture that were based on money. And I couldn't believe how I'd violated all of them. And I was a counselor, a CPA, a financial planner, but it turned my life around. I said, Lord, I'll teach these principles the rest of my life. His picture was on that book, Jason. And I told Marcia, I go, honey, wouldn't it be great to be this guy's partner? 2 years later, I get a phone call. I'm sitting at breakfast. Marcia goes, honey, it's Ron Blue. I go, yeah, right. She goes, no, it's Ron Blue. And so it started our journey there. I just never realized I was being a prophet back then.
That's so cool. And I love how, this show is the intersection of sports and faith, but it's really the intersection of, insert whatever you want and faith. Really, when we are as Christians, our faith is the center of who we are, and that includes our finances. So let's go into the sort of meat and potatoes here. We're taping this in early April. The pandemic is impacting us all. We're seeing unemployment numbers like never before. We're seeing people lose jobs. We're also seeing others remain in their roles, but pivoting in different ways to do things, of course. And those on the front lines, they're the real heroes that hear of all of this. But you've been in this industry over 40 years, as you said. How have you seen this, or have you seen, I should say, anything like this in terms of impact that's happening on our economy? Have you seen anything like this?
Yes, but different. It's like I said, this isn't my first rodeo, just a different Bronco.
Okay.
I haven't seen a Bronco before. And you go, I don't think anybody in our lifetime has. That this one is so unique. I've never seen our country shut the economy down like this. I personally, I go, you wonder, will it survive? And you go, yeah, it will. I was in 1987 when the market dropped 25% in one day. Now, the Dow Jones was at 2,500 points, so it dropped 500 points. I was in the mountains of Guatemala on a mission trip, and one of the guys said to me, Senor, the market just crashed. I go, dude, I know news gets out here late, but that was 1929. He goes, no, today. And I mean, you talk about panic because we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of that in 1987. So I remember coming into L.A., picking up the first phone and trying to call all my clients, I hope you didn't sell. But it was like everyone has been different. But I can go back in 10-year periods all the way to the 50s and saying we've always lived in uncertainty in economic times. I mean, my parents, we worried about building bomb shelters because the Soviet Union was going to drop a nuke on us. The gas lines of the 70s. I did 13 months in Vietnam as a 19-year-old. And so I go, I've seen all these things happen. They're different. But Jason, I think what the verse that is coming to, that you've heard me quote so many times at PAO, Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 11:1, he goes, divide your portions into sevens and even eights, because you do not know what evil may befall the earth. Boy, has that one come, because no one saw this coming. No one. People say, well, in 2008, you could see that one coming because of all that. That was a structural problem, that was a systemic problem. It wasn't driven by an event. This is an event-driven problem. In 2008, the banks were ready to fail. They had loaned mortgages to people they had loaned 10 mortgages to people who wanted to speculate on housing, who were making $80,000 a year. They had just got greedy, and their greed just ruined, almost destroyed. I actually would tell you, I was more worried about that one than this one for one reason. This was a strong economy going into this, but it was not. But this is an event-driven thing. Now, how long we keep doing this could become a real problem. It's already a real problem, but they have shoved massive amounts of money at it with the stimulus. But you go, okay, guess what your grandkids get to do? They get to pay for all this.
Yeah.
But, but it's people panic. And I just go, does that solve anything? The panic. Because worry is a chaotic mind. It never solves anything. And usually people are worried about things they can't control, like toilet paper.
I laugh because I don't know what the heck the toilet paper craze is, but it's real.
It's one of the last things they thought they could control because everything else was beyond their control at this point in time. So I don't know if that answers your question. But.
No, it does. I think, and I thought, I was a little surprised when you said, yes, I have. It's just, say I've been in the rodeo. I'm just riding a different Bronco now. This is still a different type of rodeo though, too, even if you have been in this rodeo for you. So I guess the simple question I'll ask is, and when I say we, I mean those listening. So we're talking about every level of finance. We're talking about people without jobs, people with jobs, people who've been affected by the economy, others who still have their jobs and so far, we'll say, still have the situation in what it was beforehand, other than maybe toilet paper. But should we be panicking right now? That's a simple question I have. I'll let you answer it. Should we be panicking?
No, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage just says, hey, I'm going to get on the horse and ride it anyways into battle. And I think that's what panic becomes. It ruins everything. People start following the herd. And I would tell you this, the majority is never right.
Yeah.
Or the majority be rich. And I just go, they're never right. And you just go, you can't panic. You have to sit back and saying, what's the best things? Now I would tell you this, in 2008, one of the things that I watched then, because there was a lot of panic, the market didn't drop 35% in a week and a half. Right. It took about 19 weeks for them to get to 10 million unemployed, where it took us only a month. It didn't take because of an event. It took a lot longer time. But what I realized is that people panic. So how do I help them get away from the panic? And that's what we designed, what we call diversification. Solomon wrote about it thousands of years ago. He just said, look, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So what we did was this. We said, after that, everyone will have at least 1 year of cash at all times to be able to ride out. Because most of these type things, even though this is different, when it comes back, and it will come back, because there'll be a point in time here where more people will start dying because of the economic situation than because of coronavirus. Hopefully our leaders will recognize, guys, we have to do something. And so what we did was we said everyone is a year in cash, so they do not have to sell in a bad market. Then, and a year means this, a year of living expenses determined by what would it take me to get by in a situation like this.
Right.
Guess what, guys? I only paid $85 for gas last month because we're all at home. There's no place to really go. So I go, so how much would it take me to get by? We're going to learn this. We look back on this. I hope we learn some good lessons. Then we tell our guys, you need to have 10 years of living expenses if you're looking at your investments in bonds. Short-term investments don't have the volatility that's so that they're not having to sell and not panicking when they're seeing these huge market decreases up, down, up, down. We're in bear territory. We don't know how long that will last, but normally, if you look back over 100 years, they rarely last more than 13 months. And it's people will hang on to this and not panic and think wisely, then they're going to do a lot better. The Bible has more to say about money than any other subject. There's literally over 2,000 verses on money, about 500 verses on prayer, 500 verses on faith. Jesus would speak about money more than he would about heaven and hell combined. Out of every 3 parables was on the issue of money. The Bible gives us principles. And guess what? They work for unbelievers too. when it says the borrower is slave to the lender, that works for an unbeliever too.
Yeah.
That it doesn't say debt's a sin. It just says it's bondage, and how much bondage can I handle? You got 4 scenarios, Jason, for an economy: inflation, deflation, a monetary collapse, and political upheaval. All countries are in one of the 4. If you are out of debt, highly liquid, and well diversified, you'll beat 3 of them. If God takes all the Christians and locks them up under a political upheaval, there's nothing I can do about that. We can't plan for that. It's his to take. And the one principle that we all start with is he claims to own everything. All the silver and gold is mine, saith the Lord. So handling it as a steward, these principles work no matter what the economy is. By the way, God knew this pandemic was going to happen before the foundation of the earth. He's not surprised. He is, disruption many times causes us to check where our faith is at. Is my net, I've always been concerned at times when you work in the financial field that I look at people's net worths all the time. Is that, do I think more about my net worth in a day than I think about God? Is my trust in my net worth, or is my trust in God? And the more you get, the more easy it is. But the more God shows you will never find security in money, ever. Because it will be, if it's how much is enough, and your answer is just a little bit more, it will never be enough. It will just keep going.
Yeah, that's really good advice. He is Don Christensen, the Executive Vice President of the Professional Athlete Division of Ronald Blue Trust, our newest partner and sponsor with us here on Sports Spectrum. Don, what's been your client's reaction to all this? Now, again, let's remind people, those listening, not everybody's a professional athlete, and yet not every professional athlete is a millionaire. Not every professional athlete has that $30 million contract that we might all associate when we think of the word professional athlete. But still, what's the client's reaction been to all this when you talk to them?
Well, first reaction by many of them is, why are you calling? Don, you've taught us, we're not worried. We have cash. We've had people call us, say, thank you that you thought ahead to have us. We have, if there was be no baseball season, no contracts, you know what? They're going to be fine. They're going to lose a year of a contract, which for some is going to be a lot bigger than others. There's guys we have that don't, they never made the big money, but we still try and keep them in where they're safe. And they're looking at 2 ways. They're looking at, when I get done with this game, do I have enough money to retrain? Because I don't have enough money to live off what I've saved the rest of my life. So do I have enough money to retrain? So that's why what we're trying to look at everyone's financial situation. We're not just investment advisors. We're financial planners first. What's your goals? Can I reach those goals? Will I hit them? And then also looking at, these things will happen. Well, now it's happened. So now people will have even more reality that, no, things can happen out of your control. Financially, these principles work even during these times. So, no, we've had pretty much peace and calm. And one of our clients gave $250,000 so that every minor leaguer in his organization would get $1,000. I have found them more as saying, now we can lean into the problem and really we can help. And the spirit of giving is it's just awesome.
That's where I was going next, because we're called to be cheerful givers, Don, and we're called to be, obviously we should tithe, and the 10th off the top, in my opinion, goes to the Lord. But giving is such a wonderful part of what you preach, and being generous, it's biblical. But there are people right now who I know who are Christians who go to churches in the area or whatever that might be a little pulling back on that. And I kind of question, but I'll let you be the expert here, because what about giving during this time? What's your thoughts there?
Well, what better way to show God your faith? And maybe this is what he's doing. This is a test of our faith, is that will you keep giving even in times like this? Or are you going to pull back and hoard? We've been given so much. And I tell all of our athletes, did God make you this talented at this point in the world with this kind of money? Because you're going to give an answer to him someday. But I've just seen guys that just say, hey, this is where we start looking who really needs help. We've done this and put this aside and this money aside so they could help and people can help. Sometimes maybe it's not just money, but just maybe means going out to help a grocery store load up their counters or a food bank or something, giving their time, anything that will cost them something. And the thing, if you want to get rid of your anxiousness, your anxiety or whatever, go serve somebody to start. Because, John, in 1 John, it says, perfect love casts out all fear. That's because perfect love isn't worried about themselves. They're not in a spirit of self-preservation. They're going out and saying, let me look at someone else. How will I help them?
I love that. Don, no, we're good. We're good, man. This is great. As we close, I have 3 questions, kind of just so the listener, as they're listening in, can know that we're winding down. But I want you to speak to 3 buckets of people here, which I think are the ones that might be listening, one of these 3 buckets. The first bucket I want you to talk to is, with encouragement, obviously, is the person struggling financially. Maybe they got laid off. Maybe they lost their job. They're unemployed, or maybe on the verge of losing their job right now. What would you say to that person that says, obviously you want them to get another job, but they're struggling right now? Maybe the unemployment is something they're thinking about. Talk to that person first, and then we'll get to the other 2 buckets.
Well, everything I'm reading is that this help is on the way for them from the stimulus package. That every anybody who makes under couple that makes under $150,000 a year is going to get around $2,400. They've upped the unemployment money. There's $500 per child everyone's getting. If you're single, and you make under $75,000, then that's who gets it there. I would tell people this: start looking at your budget. Now's the time to do a budget and divide between needs and greeds. Like, what do we need to get by? And I think that's the big key, is that, hey, I got to look and say, hey, don't go out. And I'm concerned that much of America will go out and buy big screen TVs with the money. I go, guys, now's the time to be smart. Now's the time to realize that if you didn't have those at least 3 to 6 months, which normally people will say, if you don't have that set aside, then you need to start saying, you know what, I need to do a better job right now with what we've got. Don't panic, because that's not going to help at all. If you're a believer and you have put your faith in Jesus Christ, hey, he didn't bring you this far to just dump you. So he promised you, he goes, hey, I take care of the sparrows. Do you think I won't take care of you? He will take care of your food and shelter. That's all he's promised us. He didn't promise us we had to drive a nice car or any of that. He says, hey, I'll take care of your needs. Trust him with that. Pray. Be specific in your prayers. Ask God to help people. And so I just think that it's a time to not withdraw from community. It's just trying to share with people, hey, you know what? I may need help. First call I made was to our church to say, guys, what's our benevolence fund look like? How much money's in there? We need to start asking people to give, because there's going to be people who have real needs that they just may not be able to make the rent, or they might not be. They're going to take care of, I think, what looks to me like, Jason, they're taking care of rent. They're going to help with a lot of different ways to put off till July some of this impact of this. I don't know how much they can do, but I would just say someone who's struggling like that, don't give up hope. Pray. Let someone know where you're at, too.
That's really good stuff there. I love the needs and greeds budget line. I think that's a great one. Let me ask you about the second person now in this bucket that still has their job. They're hanging on. They're filled with fear. You kind of talked about fear a little bit ago, knowing anything could happen, but they're living paycheck to paycheck, which you may have the numbers better than I do. I'm guessing there's a lot of people in this country that are living paycheck to paycheck and don't have that extra slush fund, if you will, or extra money to be able to look at 3 to 6 months down the road here. Speak to that person.
When I read Ron Blue's book years ago, I got on my knees. I repented to the Lord for violating all the principles that he had out there laying for me. And I just made up my mind that I was going to start following him. So I started saying, where am I at now? What things would I have done different had I known this was coming a year ago? What would I have done different? And start practicing those. Mm-hmm. Quit sitting back. When we sit back and just run scenarios in our minds, what if this happens? What if this? And that's what happens to all of us. And we go to bed at night and we start running, conversations that have never happened. We've got these scenarios. They go, you're trying to play God. Quit trying to play God. You don't know. The Bible said you don't know what evil may befall you. Jesus said, why are you worried about tomorrow? He goes, today has enough trouble of its own. Deal with today. Start dealing with moves that you would have made. Start by, if you've never had a budget or a cash flow, start by put one together right now. Where are we at now? What moves would we make if we lose our job? Because it's about 1 month for every year you were on your job to find a new job. So maybe next time I'd say, so the next thing is this. Before you go out and buy or borrow something, maybe you ought to start saying, you know what, we get back to normal here or whatever, we're going to start building that emergency fund. That's 6 months. I'd go minimum 6 months. You don't belong in the stock market until you don't even belong in the market until you got 6 months emergency cash to get by. Because that's, it's not that we look at the money that we're trusting in, but God gave the principle. He says, hey, you know what? I gave you the principles, so why don't you do them?
The last one, Don, as we wind down here, speak to the person who has their job, maybe a little fear creeping in, but they want to continue to steward their money in the right way. Maybe they're not an athlete and they don't have, maybe they're not making six figures, but they still have their job and they've done well, we'll just say, and kind of making some of the smart decisions that you've talked about. But they're wondering in this point, in this climate, how to steward their money properly, which is a term you use a lot, I know, with Ronald Blue Trust, being good stewards of your wealth. Speak to that last person for us.
Well, I would say to them, look, the number one thing is this. You get out of all consumer credit debt you've got, the one you're paying the highest interest on. Start there. Build the emergency fund. If you are over the age of 50, you need at least 1 year of living expenses. If you're under the age of 50, minimum is 6 months. And I would just say, guys, I like a year because it just goes, we don't know how long this will last, because even if we go back to work at April 30th or start back, the impact on people's psychic could last for a while. It could take a while for things to happen, for people to come back. But that's why I would say a little bit longer. Then start saying, okay, save for, if you need a car coming up, save for that first. Okay? Start getting out of debt and start living a life that debt is not included. Then if you want to start saving for long-term needs and stuff, start with what we call the 3 buckets. First bucket, our cash bucket. Second bucket is 3 to 9 years of living expenses in a bond portfolio, a liquid bond portfolio. That means I don't need this money for 10 years. Yeah. And if I had to go raise, like we're looking at all our cash positions for our clients, if they need the year supply of cash, we're going to sell bonds because they've only taken about a 5.3% hit since the end of the year. So we're going to sell bonds first to raise cash to get that 1 year. Then anything I don't need for 10 years, then you can put in long-term investments. Stock market is long-term investments. It is and over time, risk comes down. So you can look at that, and it doesn't matter. Don't try and time the bottom. Too many people, there's going to be panic selling and there's going to be panic buying. Oh, I'm going to miss the bottom. If you got in, all the money that is made in a 10-year period is made in 40 days, and most of it's made in 10 days. If you are not in for the downside, you will not be in for the upside. And nobody can time the market. That's what Solomon said. No one knows what evil may befall the earth.
He is Don Christensen, Executive Vice President of the Professional Athlete Division of Ronald Blue Trust, our newest partners and sponsors here on Sports Spectrum. Check out ronblue.com to learn more about the work they're doing. And Don, listen, man, love you. So glad that you came on here. And thanks for all the advice. Thanks for all the encouragement. And thank you. Is there ways that people can get in touch? Should I just have them go to the website, ROM Blue, to learn more and to kind of, if they have any questions, to kind of get in touch with someone?
Yeah, go to the website. It has the numbers they can call, and they can send an email directly to me if they have a question. on the website so I can answer it for them, and it'll be directed.
Perfect.
So do that. Thanks for doing this, Jason. It was great being with you, buddy.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. That's great stuff there from Don Christensen. Again, Executive Vice President of the Pro Athlete Division at Ronald Blue Trust. You can reach Don by going to the website, ronblue.com. Go to ronblue.com. You can read a little bit about what they're about. You know, they apply biblical wisdom and technical expertise to help their clients make wise financial decisions, experiencing clarity and confidence, and leaving a lasting legacy. And Don is spearheading the Pro Athlete Division. But like he said, you can find him on the website, and his email is right there. If you have a question, send him an email. I'm sure he'd love to respond to you and answer any question that you might have. So check it out over at the website, ronblue.com. Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate you tuning in to Sports Spectrum. Keep tabs on us by going to our website, sportspectrum.com. You'll find all of our content there, including this podcast, articles all day long on the intersection of sports and faith, as well as a daily devotional every morning at 6 a.m. Eastern to start your day right with God. Check it out over at sportspectrum.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and stay safe.